My family gave my siblings $600,000 while I slept in my car working night shifts. Years later, they came back begging for help, but I had built an empire and left them speechless. I'm 27 years old. I work in construction and renovations, and basically my family screwed up my life for years without me realizing how bad it really was, until one day I sat down to do the math and figured out that my siblings had literally received over $200,000 in support from my parents while I got $7,000 to buy work tools. And when I say literally, I mean I actually added it all up. Every cent, every rent payment, every college tuition, every expensive wedding, everything. I guess I should start from the beginning. When we were kids and everything seemed more or less normal, or at least I thought it was normal because it was all I knew. There are 4 of us siblings. Well, I'm the second of 4. Jennifer is the oldest. She's like 31 now. She was always the star of the family, you know. The one who got perfect grades and ended up going to an Ivy League university that cost like $60,000 a year, and obviously my parents paid for everything, every cent. Then there's me, Ryan. The one who apparently was born to figure things out on his own, although nobody explicitly told me that at the time. Then comes Matthew, my younger brother. He's 24. And finally Lauren, the baby of the family, just turned 22. We grew up in a normal house, middle class. My dad worked in finance or something like that. My mom was a nurse. And we always had what we needed, but we weren't millionaires either. Or so I thought. The thing is, when we were kids, like 10 or 12 years old, you could already notice some weird things, but I was too young to process it. Jennifer always had piano lessons, French classes, expensive summer camps, all that stuff. I'd asked to go to a sports camp that cost like $300, and my parents would tell me there was no budget that year, but somehow there was budget for Jennifer to go to a summer program in France that cost thousands. Matthew and Lauren also had their things, classes for this and that, expensive sports equipment, school trips. I settled for playing soccer in Daughter, the city's free league, and I was fine with that. Honestly, I didn't complain much because I thought that's just how things were, that I was the most independent one or something. When it came time to go to college, that's when things got more obvious, but I still didn't fully understand it. Jennifer went to Columbia, a super expensive Ivy League university, and my parents not only paid the full tuition but also paid for her apartment in New York, food, books, everything. I'm talking about like $70,000 a year, minimum, for 4 years. Do the math. When it was my turn to go to college, I was like 18 and excited because I thought I was finally going to have the same experience as Jennifer, but turns out my parents sat me down and told me, "Look, Ryan, the thing is we can't afford a private university for you. You're going to have to go to a state school and look for scholarships and student loans." And I was like, seriously? But I didn't say anything because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. So I ended up going to a state university, which is fine. I'm not complaining about the education I received, but I had to work full-time while studying to pay rent for a shared apartment with 3 roommates in a place that was basically a dump. I worked in construction on weekends and did night shifts at a warehouse during the week, slept like 4 hours a night, and my grades suffered because it was impossible to keep up with everything. My parents knew I was struggling, but never offered real help. Just comments like, "That's how character is built," or "You're learning the value of hard work." Matthew, my younger brother, when it was his turn to go to college a few years later, also went to a state university, but my parents paid for everything, full tuition, an apartment just for him, a new car, food, everything. And when I asked my mom why Matthew had everything paid for and I had to kill myself working, she said something like, "It's just that Matthew is more sensitive and needs to focus on his studies." Like, what? After graduating with a student loan debt of like $40,000, I decided to go all in on construction and renovations because it was what I knew how to do, and I was good at it. I started working for a small company and eventually wanted to start my own business. I needed like $7,000 to buy professional tools, a used but decent truck, and some basic stuff to get started. I asked my parents for help, not as a gift but as a loan I was going to pay back, and after a lot of begging and explaining my business plan, they gave me the $7,000, but they made me sign an official loan document with a payment plan. I paid them back every last cent in less than 2 years, with market rate interest that they themselves established. Meanwhile, Jennifer married a guy she met at Columbia, a lawyer or something, and my parents gave her $200,000 for the wedding. When I say $200,000, I'm not exaggerating. It was a wedding at a super fancy venue with like 300 guests, designer, dress, honeymoon in the Maldives, all paid for by my parents. I went to the wedding, obviously, and the whole time I was thinking about how that money could have completely changed my life. But I swallowed my feelings because I didn't want to ruin my sister's day. Matthew decided to do a master's degree after his bachelor's, and my parents paid for the full tuition plus 2 years of rent in a pretty nice apartment near the university. We're talking about another $80,000 easy. Lauren, the youngest, also went to college, and my parents not only paid for everything, but then covered all her student loans when she graduated, like $35,000 that they just paid off in one go. And there I was, struggling with my business, living in a tiny apartment, driving a truck that broke down every 2 weeks, but proud to be doing it on my own because that's what was expected of me, I guess. The thing is, for years I simply accepted that things were like that I was different from my siblings, that maybe I was stronger or more capable of handling things on my own. I don't know. I convinced myself of that so I wouldn't feel so bad. But like 6 months ago, we were all at a family dinner, one of those obligatory Sunday gatherings where everyone pretends we're a happy, united family. Jennifer was talking about how she and her husband had just bought a new house, a huge house in an expensive neighborhood, and my mom was super excited asking her about the details. Matthew casually mentioned that he had finished paying off his new car. Well, when I say he, I mean my parents had finished making the payments on the car they bought him after his master's degree. Lauren was talking about a trip to Europe she was going to take, also financed by my parents as a graduation gift. And I was sitting there, eating the chicken I had brought because I knew my mom wasn't going to cook enough for everyone. Listening to all these stories about money and gifts and support, and something in my head clicked. I started doing mental math right there at the table. Jennifer, $240,000 in college, $200,000 in wedding, probably another $50,000 in various gifts over the years. We're talking about almost $500,000. Matthew, $60,000 in college, $80,000 in masters and rent, $25,000 for the car, other random expenses, easily $200,000. Lauren, $70,000 in college, $35,000 in loans paid off, the Europe trip, other gifts, another $150,000. And me, Ryan, the forgotten one, $7,000 that I had to pay back with interest. I felt like my head was going to explode. Jennifer was saying something about renovating her kitchen and asking my dad for advice, and I just said, "Stop. I need to say something." The whole table went silent, and they looked at me like I had screamed in a library. I told them, basically just like this, "You three have received everything in life on a silver platter. Everything paid for, everything gifted, zero effort on your part, and I've had to fight for every cent I have." My dad interrupted me, saying, "Ryan, this isn't the time for this." But I was already angry, very angry, like years of accumulated resentment exploding all at once. I told them, "Jennifer, they paid for a $200,000 wedding for you. Do you know how much I make in a year? Less than that. Way less. Matthew, they paid for your entire master's degree while I was working night shifts to pay for my own classes. Lauren, they even paid off your student loans that you shouldn't have even had because they were already paying for everything, and they gave me $7,000 that I had to pay back like I was a bank." My mom tried to say something about how each child is different and has different needs, and I completely exploded. I yelled at them, "This isn't about needs. This is about you treating me like I wasn't part of this family, like I didn't deserve the same support they got." I got up from the table, grabbed my keys, and my dad told me, "Sit down right now," but I was already walking toward the door. Jennifer called out, saying I was exaggerating, that I was being dramatic, and that made me even angrier. I said something like, "Keep enjoying your free money. I'm leaving." And I left the house, slamming the door so hard it probably echoed through the whole block. I drove to a park near my apartment and sat there in my car for like 2 hours, just processing everything, feeling how years of frustration and pain that I had buried deep down were coming to the surface. I called my best friend, told him everything, and he said something that was right. He told me, Dude, that's not okay. You should document everything and confront them with real evidence, not just emotions. And that's exactly what I did. I spent the next few days, literally full days, going through old emails, text messages, bank statements, anything I could find that would prove the disparity. I called Jennifer with an excuse and casually asked her how much her wedding cost, and she told me the exact number because she was proud of it. I asked Matthew about his master's degree, how much it cost, and he gave me all the details without suspecting anything. I researched how much Ivy League universities cost, how much rent costs in different cities, everything. I made a presentation, yes, a PowerPoint presentation like it was a business meeting, with graphs and numbers and everything. The presentation had a title that said something like, Analysis of Parental Resource Distribution, 1996 to 2023, or something super formal like that to make it look serious. It had a bar graph showing how much money each sibling had received, with different colors for each category: education, housing, transportation, special events, loans paid off, gifts. Jennifer's bar was huge, like $490,000 in total. Matthew had like $210,000. Lauren, around $160,000. And my bar was so small you could barely see it on the graph. $7,000. Which I then put an asterisk, clarifying it was a loan with interest that I paid back completely. I waited for it to be Lauren's birthday. I knew there was going to be another family dinner. And I decided that was the moment. I arrived early, set up my laptop in the living room, connected the projector I had specifically rented for this. Yes, I rented a projector because I wanted everyone to see the graphs on a big screen, and waited for everyone to arrive. When they were all sitting down, eating cake and opening gifts, my parents had given Lauren $5,000 cash as a birthday gift. By the way, I stood up and said, I have something I want to show all of you. My dad said, Ryan, not now, but I had already turned on the projector. The first slide appeared on the wall with the title, and everyone went quiet. Matthew said something like, What is this? And I responded, This is the truth. This is documented evidence of how you've treated your children for the last 27 years. I started showing each slide, explaining each number, each transaction, each difference. I had screenshots of emails, where my parents confirmed tuition payments, copies of checks, bank statements. He had asked for access to some documents, pretending it was for my own records. Everything. The room was in deathly silence. Jennifer was staring at the screen with her mouth open. Matthew's face was red. I don't know if from embarrassment or anger. Lauren was crying, which wasn't my intention, but I didn't feel bad about it either. My parents were sitting on the couch saying nothing. My mom had her hands over her face. My dad was looking at the floor. I got to the final slide, which was a direct comparison. Total invested in Jennifer, $490,000. Total invested in Matthew, $210,000. Total invested in Lauren, $160,000. Total invested in Ryan, $7,000 loan with interest, fully repaid. I let that last slide stay there for a long minute. Nobody said anything. Just the sound of the projector humming. Finally, my mom spoke and said, Ryan, honey, we can explain all of this. Each situation was different, but I interrupted her and said, I don't want explanations. Jennifer tried to defend my parents, saying something like, Mom and Dad did the best they could with the resources they had at each moment. And I responded, Jennifer, shut up. Seriously, you received $500,000. You have no right to speak here. Matthew, surprisingly, said something I didn't expect. He said, I think Ryan is right. This isn't okay. I never realized it was this bad. But my parents, especially my dad, got defensive. My dad got up from the couch and said, We did what we thought was right at each moment. We're not going to apologize for taking care of our children. And I yelled at him, But you didn't take care of all your children equally. You only took care of 3 and let the 4th one figure it out on his own. My mom tried to take a different, more emotional approach, saying they had always loved me the same as my siblings, that love isn't measured in money. And I told her, You're right. Love isn't measured in money, but support and opportunities are. And you decided to give them all the opportunities while you left me to struggle alone. My dad approached me, like really close, and told me in a low but threatening voice, "You should be grateful for what you got. Many kids don't get anything. If you can't be grateful, then maybe you shouldn't be part of this family." That was the breaking point for me. I told him, "You know what? You're right. Maybe I shouldn't be part of this family. I clearly never really was." I grabbed my laptop, disconnected everything, and left the house for the second time in 2 weeks. This time, Jennifer followed me to the car, knocked on my window, and when I rolled it down, she said, "Ryan, please, don't leave like this. We can talk about this." I told her, "Jennifer, there's nothing to talk about. Enjoy your life bought with mom and dad's money," and I left. I blocked my entire family on my phone. I blocked my parents, Jennifer, Matthew, Lauren, everyone. I blocked their social media, their emails, everything. I decided that if they could decide I didn't deserve the same treatment as my siblings, then I could decide they didn't deserve to be in my life. The first few months were tough. I'm not gonna lie, there were days where I almost called them, where I almost gave in and sent a message. But I stayed firm because I knew if I went back, nothing would really change. I focused completely on my business. I worked like 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, taking every job I could, saving every penny, reinvesting everything in the business. I hired my first employee like 6 months after cutting contact, a young guy who reminded me of myself when I was starting out, and I paid him well, gave him opportunities to learn, treated him the way I wished I had been treated. The business started growing rapidly, because it turns out that when you don't have family drama consuming all your emotional energy, you can focus and do amazing things. Fast forward like 3 years after that disastrous Lauren's birthday dinner. My business was thriving. I had 5 employees, 2 company trucks, a small but decent office. I was making like 6 figures a year, had my own apartment that wasn't a dump. I had paid off all my student debt. Basically, I was living well, better than well. I was successful completely on my own without a single cent of family help. One day I got a call from an unknown number, and normally I don't answer those calls, but something told me to answer. It was Matthew. I don't know how he got my new number, probably paid someone to investigate or something, he told me. "Ryan, I need to tell you something." And he sounded weird, like worried or scared. I told him, "You have 8 minutes. He told me that Jennifer and her husband had gotten divorced, that Jennifer had basically cut contact with my parents because, and this is verbatim, she finally realized that mom and dad are toxic people who used money to control their children. Matthew also told me he had a huge fight with my parents about something related to his career and that he wasn't talking to them either. And Lauren, apparently, had moved to the other side of the country specifically to get away from them. So, wait, let me process this. The 3 children who received all the love and money and support had now abandoned my parents. All 3. The ones who were the favorites for decades now wanted nothing to do with them. Matthew told me that my parents were devastated, that my mom cried all the time, that my dad had developed health problems from stress, that they were financially tight because apparently they had been living beyond their means for years, and now that they retired, they didn't have as much money as they thought, he told me. "I think they want to talk to you. I think they finally understand that they treated you wrong," I told Matthew. "And what do you want me to do with that information?" He responded, "I don't know. I just thought you should know. I thought maybe you'd want to reconnect or something." I told him, "Matthew, I appreciate you calling me, but I don't owe them anything. I spent years feeling like the defective son, like something was wrong with me, when actually the problem was them all along." Matthew was quiet for a moment and then said, "You're right. I'm sorry for my part in all this. I should have seen it before." I told him I didn't hold a grudge against him or my other siblings, that they had also been victims of the toxic family dynamic in their own way, and we hung up. Like 2 months after that call, I got an email from my mom. I don't know how she got my new email. Probably Matthew gave it to her. The email was long, like 3 pages, basically an extensive apology where she admitted they had treated me unfairly, that they regretted it, that they wanted to have a relationship with me, that they were proud of what I had achieved, all that kind of stuff. At the end of the email, she asked if we could meet to talk in person. I didn't respond immediately. I let the email sit there in my inbox for like 2 weeks while I decided what to do. Eventually, I responded with a short message: I can meet with you once. I'm not promising anything more than that. We agreed to meet at a neutral cafe, not at their house or anywhere that had family history. I arrived at the cafe 5 minutes late on purpose. I didn't want to be there waiting for them and feeling anxious. When I walked in, I saw them sitting at a table in the back, and I almost didn't recognize them. My dad, who had always been this big, intimidating man, looked small and old. He had probably lost like 30 pounds. My mom had completely gray hair, deep wrinkles. She looked exhausted. I sat down without greeting them. Just sat down and waited for them to speak. My dad started with a prepared speech about how they had reflected a lot, how they realized now their mistakes, how I was right about everything I said at that dinner years ago. My mom was crying while my dad talked, wiping tears with a napkin from the cafe. When my dad finished his speech, they just sat there looking at me, waiting for me to say something, but I was just there processing, seeing these two people who were once my parents and feeling nothing. Honestly, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness, just a kind of emptiness. Finally, I spoke and said, I appreciate that you're admitting you were wrong, but that doesn't change the past. It doesn't change that I spent my 20s struggling alone, while my siblings lived comfortably. My dad said, we know, and we want to compensate you somehow. And I almost laughed in his face. I told him, compensate me? With what? I don't need your money anymore. I don't need your support anymore. I built my life alone and I'm fine. My mom said something like, it's not just about money. We want to have a relationship with you. We want to be in your life. I told them the truth. I told them, honestly, I don't know if I want that. I spent 3 years without you and they were the 3 most productive and peaceful years of my life. My dad broke down at that moment, literally started crying. This man who had never shown emotion in my life was crying in a public cafe, and that was disturbing to see. He said through sobs, we lost all our children, they all walked away from us, and now we understand it was our fault. But you're the only one who achieved something real on your own. The only one who's truly independent and successful, and you did it despite us, not thanks to us. My mom added, your siblings, all of them are struggling now because they never learned to be independent. We gave them everything and they never learned the value of effort. But you did. And the ironic thing, the absolutely ironic thing, is that by treating you worse, we made you into a better person. Although that doesn't make what we did right. I nodded because she was right about that, but I also told her, the fact that I turned out okay doesn't justify what you did. You can't take credit for my success when you had nothing to do with it. They stayed quiet, and then my dad said something that surprised me. He said, Ryan, we're in financial trouble. We spent too much on your siblings for years, and now in retirement we don't have enough, and none of them will talk to us. None of them would help us even if we could ask them. I know we have no right to ask you anything, but... He didn't finish the sentence, but the message was clear. They wanted money. I got up from the table without saying anything, took out my wallet, put down a $20 bill to cover my coffee that I hadn't even touched, and started walking toward the door. My mom called out, Ryan, please, and I stopped, turned around and told them, I don't owe you anything, absolutely nothing. You had the chance to be my parents for 24 years, and you chose not to really be. Now you have to live with the consequences of those decisions. Just like I had to live with the consequences of not having your support, and I left. I haven't heard from them since then. That was like 6 months ago. Sometimes I think about that meeting at the cafe, about how destroyed and desperate they looked. And a small part of me feels something. I don't know if it's pity or sadness or what, but most of me knows I made the right decision. Matthew calls me every couple of months just to catch up. He tells me that Jennifer is rebuilding her life after the divorce, that Lauren is in therapy processing all the family dynamics, that he's focusing on his career and trying to be more independent. Last week, I hired my 10th employee, which means my little construction business that I started with $7,000 borrowed is now a real company with double-digit employees. I bought a house last month. Nothing ostentatious, but it's mine, fully paid off without a mortgage because I saved and worked hard for years. I have a girlfriend I met a year ago, someone who comes from a functional, normal family. And when I told her this whole story, she was shocked. She couldn't believe parents could do that. I'm not going to lie and say I'm completely at peace with everything, because there are still days when I feel anger. When I think about all the opportunities they denied me, all the times I had to choose between eating well or paying rent, all the nights I slept in my car between work shifts because I didn't have time to go home. But I also recognize that that struggle made me who I am. It taught me the value of money. It taught me to work hard. It taught me that you can't trust others to rescue you. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if my parents had given me the same support as my siblings, if I would have been successful anyway, or if I would have become dependent and weak like them. I'll never know. What I do know is that I don't owe my success to my parents. I owe it to myself. Every cent I have, I earned it. Every achievement is mine, and nobody can take that away from me. I guess the moral, if there is one, is that parental favoritism doesn't just hurt the child who is ignored, but also harms the children who are favored because they never learn to fend for themselves. My siblings, despite receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars, are struggling now because they never developed the skills I had to develop out of necessity. And my parents, who thought they were doing the best for their favorite children, ended up losing all their children one way or another. Will I forgive them someday? I don't know. Will I have a relationship with them again? Probably not. Am I okay with that? Most days? Yes. I'm okay with that.